of anything I've learned from working in primary care and working in a nonprofit hospital leadership, and then working as a chief medical officer in a for-profit business trying to prevent disease, we built a whole system, of course, that spends all of our energy, time, and money on treating illness. We spend very little time systematically preventing these things in the first place.
Try to fix the current system or reimagine something new? Will healthcare ever serve consumers just like me and you? The power's in our hands, but every side's gotta come together. We want the newer generations to get something better. Until we flip the script and talk about what gets prevented. Until we see the changes permanent as if we meant it. Until healthcare is finally consumer-centered. We've got a lot to rap about.
Welcome back to the leading podcast about consumer-centered health. This is more than a show. This is a mission, y'all. As healthcare leaders, we're here to share with you the latest consumer-centered ways that healthcare is being designed, marketed, and delivered. And as consumers yourselves, we want you to understand how these options work and why they might be right for you and your loved ones. Here's what's going down today. First up, we have the Flava of the week about the launch of Lilly Employer Connect. Is this platform a signal that the direct-to-employer space is heating up for preventive care? And will it ultimately give consumers better priced access to name-brand obesity treatments? I'll talk about that. Then Dr. Wendy Swanson offers an inside look at her journey founding Skinmetal, why she believes that for-profit consumer product companies can be public health entities, and what has and hasn't changed since her days as an early pioneer of social media and medicine. I'm Jared Johnson. Let's get it. Flava of the week. Eli Lilly's latest move is taking its popular obesity treatments directly to employers. On March 5th, they announced the launch of Lilly Employer Connect, a new platform designed to help employers expand access to obesity treatments for their workforce. The program allows employers to work with independent program administrators to offer flexible benefit designs that cover obesity management medications. As part of the launch, Lilly's Zepbound Quick Pen will be available through participating pharmacies at a discounted price of $4.49 across all doses, with employee out-of-pocket costs varying depending on how each employer structures its cost-sharing model. The initiative aims to address a significant access gap in obesity care. More than 100 million U.S. adults live with obesity, and the condition is estimated to cost the U.S. economy $1.7 trillion annually through medical expenses and lost productivity. Despite obesity being recognized as a chronic disease, roughly half of commercially insured employers do not have coverage for weight management medications. Lilly's program is designed to lower financial barriers and give employers more transparency and control over how they offer access to treatments. The platform launches with more than 15 independent program administrators and a nationwide pharmacy network, allowing employers to pair medication access with services such as virtual or in-person clinical care and behavioral support. By enabling employers to offer coverage outside traditional pharmacy benefit designs, Lilly hopes the platform will make widely prescribed medications like Zepbound more accessible while helping employers manage the cost of obesity care for their workforce. What's the consumer lens? I see this as a signal of how direct-to-employer plans can impact consumer health. We've spoken with founders from several of these independent program administrators here on the show, as well as those offering the name brands like Ozempic, Wegovy, and Zepbound. And while they might clash in their approach, they all seem to agree that prices will keep dropping for both name brand and compounded GLP-1s. So now the burden shifts even more to consumers and employer benefit designers to do the research and understand their options. I see that as a positive step, although just how quickly and effectively it combats obesity in our country remains to be seen. At this point, though, I'll take just about any progress we can get. Let's watch whether more manufacturers follow Lilly into the direct-to-employer space with preventive health solutions and whether it makes an impact on the health of our society. That's another way that we'll build the healthcare of tomorrow, and that's the Flava of the week. The flow. All right, everyone, let's get into the flow. What a special episode. We have a bit of a full circle moment here, and I'll come back to what that means probably maybe towards the end of the show. I'm speaking with Dr. Wendy Swanson. She needs no introduction, but I just want to welcome you to Healthcare Wrap, and we have a lot to talk about.
Thank you. I'm obviously delighted to be here. Fun.
So, okay, let's bring people up to speed. I think a lot of people know you from a couple of different phases prior to this. So what do you want people to know about where you are, what you do? And we're going to dive way deep into the founder story, what's going on with Skinmetal, and where you're at now.
Yeah, well, I'm the same person. So, I'm first and foremost, and the kind of true focus and delight of my life continues to be raising two teenage boys. My first son is now in college, and my second son is finishing out high school. And then Second to that, I'm a physician and bioethicist through and through. And I, more than anything today, know, as I have said, and I think when we did the podcast years ago, physicians need to continue to behave in new ways. And right now, it's very clear to me that physicians need to be making new solutions in preventative health and public health, in the dismantling of what's happening around us, in the lack of trust, increasing kind of stress on the system of belief in science, and ultimately just kind of the pragmatic ways we go about changing behavior and improving people's lives. So I'm now a founder and CEO of a bootstrap startup to date and working harder than I've ever worked before. That's where I am.
I would imagine the energy, we're referring to it as founder energy, which is one of my favorite parts of this show, is just hearing the whole process. And you were referring off the air to me of just the whole thought of it's just different. It's not like there wasn't a lot of work in other phases, but like the founder journey is very unique, broader than probably most other roles anyone will ever experience. It feels like, and not easy to compare it to other journeys that anyone else has in their careers, but there's some unique things about that founder journey. Maybe we can start there and then we'll hear about what the problem is that you're trying to solve and things. But like, let's start there. So what led you up to where you are now? Like specifically, your career has been focused on prevention, for instance. So yeah, let's dive into that. What got you here?
I mean, well, a couple of things got me here. Kind of what I said, that I think we need to solve problems in a new way. I've always believed that. So when I started Mama Doc back in 2009, that was about like physicians needed to be on social media. And I was one of the very first physicians to do that and kind of take away my own anonymity and privacy for kind of the belief that health translation, where people wanted to be, was important. In some ways, I was lucky enough to come through clinical practice for 12 years, executive leadership in the hospital, the media career that I had. And then I went into my first job for a for-profit business, which was the chief medical officer of a startup that had spun out of Stanford. And we were working to prevent food allergies in children. And tactically speaking, we were creating a consumer product good, and we were teaching and educating parents and pediatricians at once of the novel science that said, you got to eat all these different allergens early in life, and that will downregulate the kind of sensitization that leads to allergy. And fundamentally, that was overwhelmingly helpful to me as a physician because I learned how a company basically partnered with venture capitalists to raise money, how to take venture capital money and work in the boardroom to strategically solve a health problem through getting something into people's houses that they purchased that would ultimately take it from idea and advice to action and change. And I became kind of increasingly an impact junkie in that pediatricians by and large are there because they want to be at the beginning of life and benefit from the long tail of if you do certain things right in early life, it lasts a whole lifetime. And moving into entrepreneurship as the chief medical officer, at least in that role, that isn't functionally entrepreneurship, but it was startup land, showed me that there were just multiple different ways to solve a problem. And we were lucky enough at Spoonful One where I was to partner with Nestle Health Science, and I launched a big trial. We launched product all over the world. I got to work with clinicians in Japan and China, the UK, Australia, presented data around the world. It just opened up that I wanted to change the food source for babies, and that the way that I was going to function as a physician was really different. And so after we exited to Nestle Health Science, I stood around and I literally I took 4 or 5 company ideas and I was like, which is it going to be? I liked the pace and the intensity of startup life. I liked the people that were drawn to it. So it wasn't kind of like I work for the man people. It was people deeply engaged at compromising kind of their personal lives, even to, not that I want people to have to do that, but people who were really risk tolerant, who wanted to see the world differently and who were able to incur the risk of just working at a startup that may not last, being paid and compensated in a way that wasn't enduring and stabilizing, but rather were stabilized by the notion that what they did could make something different. And as I was socializing the ideas, I actually had a day where I had 2 critical conversations. I had a call with Eric Topol, who's been a friend and mentor of mine for a long time. And he and I were looking through these different companies. And I was like, oh, there's Skinmetal. And then here's this idea that's in digital health. And here's this idea in AI where you'd kind of expect I was going to go. And we focused in on Skinmetal and he just really understood it. And then immediately from hanging out with him, I got on a call with John Brownstein, who he's the chief of innovation at Boston Children's and just a kind of fellow conspirator. And he's delightful. I mean, he is the embodied embodiment of an enthusiast. And he gets on the call and I'm going over these things. He's like, Wendy Sue, like, I know you're a digital health person, but like that. And he has teenage children and he just kind of got it. And I got off the call and he kind of texted me, like it just kind of rang out. And it became increasingly clear that I'd been thinking about Skinmetal for a really long time. I was diagnosed with skin cancer, malignant melanoma in like 2012. So I was in my 30s. And when you look at the data of what leads to skin cancer, it shouldn't have been a big surprise to me that I developed skin cancer, but it sure was. And a surgery, another surgery, multiple different biopsies, and like all the whole thing of it was alarming to me in kind of that middle adulthood. And so I bought the domains for Skinmetal in 2012 and I filed trademarks, which I received from the Patent and Trademark Office in 2013. But I had like 5 jobs at the time and I was probably working 70 plus hours a week through Seattle Mama Doc and through practicing clinical medicine and working at the startup and working at the television station and all that. I mean, I had no business starting a company. So I let the trademark fall and I just kind of been walking around the planet thinking about it. And when I came to it now, it was a kind of the confluence of there's been this huge skincare boom. We've continued to see an engagement in young people, but all people in some ways in the skincare industry. And simultaneously, as I started to dig into it more, I started to recognize and realize there was a sex difference in skin cancer that was likely product of the industry itself. Men have historically outsourced their sunscreen to the women in their lives, and the product has ultimately been feminized to date. So we'll get into that more maybe, but I looked at it. I got a lot of enthusiastic people around me, and it was just kind of obvious that it was go time, and that the idea of going back to clinical medicine full time or going back to a large organization or a hospital system and kind of teaching innovation, or it wasn't enough for me. Like I think during the time that I was doing the startup as well, my son also had a cancer diagnosis, a different kind of cancer, but that rattled my soul as well towards I've got to take a bigger risk. And I now have worked as an executive in a hospital, been a primary care doctor, worked in media, function as a speaker, like understand finance in a way I didn't before. And I got to reinvest in some of my own ideas and see if I can kind of dent the world a little bit more. So it was from a lonely and scared place. I mean, I kind of in a very cliche way, I'm doing it afraid. I mean, it's not, I think people can look from the outside and think like, I've got everything I need to do this. And I don't think any founder ever feels that way. I think the other thing is that when you begin to incorporate a company and found a company, your work is overwhelmingly logistical. It's aspirational. It's mission oriented. It's fueled. It's creative. It's imaginative. But at the same time, the daily work is paperwork and accounts and passwords and getting back to people and scrapping money together and talking to investors and talking to them again and talking to them again and talking to them again and putting your words in a deck and putting your words on a file and partnering with all the different people you do to pull it off. So that's kind of, I mean, I think there was a confluence of, if not now, when, right? It was very obvious that the skincare boom has happened. Skinmetal's been rattling along for good. And when I originally got the domain, I thought it would be a family notion. As a pediatrician, it was like, oh, I'll start a family brand so that we can take strength and confidence as the beginning point rather than the fear of avoidance. But when I started looking at the data to realize that boys and girls use sunscreen differently, men and women use sunscreen differently, and consequently, men and women have very different rates of cancer as they age. And it became just obvious to me that after raising 2 teenage boys and being a middle school teacher before I went to medical school and like kind of loving adolescence and young adulthood, just as an opportunity, that the drilling into guys and drilling into men in the sense of how do they think, what's rewarding to them, what have they not been given, and what's the challenge of modern masculinity, and can we offer something better? And can we enter a multi-billion-dollar established industry and carve out a new place in it so that 5-10 years from now, we have a really different set of realities?
Wow. When I even just think of the brand implications as a founder here to what you're just saying about boys and girls differently, men and women differently, how they're approaching things differently, that has got to be just another challenge on the list in terms of translating what you know from a public health communication brand like side of things into this brand, because this is still, it's clearly mission driven, but it's also still a consumer product company. So hey, how does that work?
Well, also because I studied bioethics, I did a master's in bioethics when I did my medical degree. I mean, I think it's easy for us to just suggest that for-profit industries who make consumer goods are not public health companies. And I would tell you that strongly disagree. That I could sit in the office like the gold standard advice is today and say, you should be wearing sunscreen SPF 30 or more, broad spectrum, especially midday. And when it's the middle of the day, you should probably just stay inside. I could say that's the gold standard advice that we've got. I could go and see 25 patients a day. I could try to scale it on a blog. I could go to media. Or I could say, wait, we have this sex difference in how women and men use these products. We have an industry, a multi-billion-dollar industry, fueling and interested and captivated to get sales as fast as possible. And then I could say, and when they do that, they ignore the opportunity to give a product that attracts a guy's attention. And we're relying on a pediatrician or a dermatologist or a clinician to kind of remind people about risk. We know that a single sunburn, blistering, like a real bad sunburn, a single blistering sunburn in your life at any time, but particularly when you're young, will double your lifetime risk of developing malignant melanoma. Skin cancers are the most common cause of cancer in the United States. About 1 in 4 Americans will get a skin cancer through their lifetime. But one single day on a boat, at a park, at a practice, on a sports team, one single day, you double your lifetime risk of a cancer. So we have a drug for that. In the United States, we regulate sunscreen as a drug. We only use 16 ingredients here. And we use it disproportionately as women and men. So if you look at CDC data, for example, on average, about 30% of women will say if they're going to go out, adult women, if they're going to go outside for more than an hour, they're going to put on sunscreen. We know, for example, over 40% of women will say they wear a daily product that has UV protection. When you ask men specifically, like young guys, so if you ask a 20-year-old guy, only 8% of guys between 18 and 29 will say that they're going to use sunscreen if they're going to go outside for more than an hour. So last weekend,
that's about right.
Yeah, last weekend I was at the Waste Management Open down in Phoenix. And we were there as a brand, just like this bro-tastic golf event. Like I love golf. I've been a golf fan. I've been golfing since I was a child. And we're at this like basically day party, like day drinking party, right? Like people are like crazy. And there are dudes everywhere with fried skin. They have like leathery skin from years and years of sun exposure. They have acute sunburn from that day, right? They're just living out the data, which is they're going to an event to stand around all day and they're not using any sun protection. And my interest is in saying, okay, a consumer product good company can compete with my ability as a pediatrician to opine in the office. And if I make a product that guys want, that they're attracted to, that gives them some kind of immediate benefit, that when they get that immediate benefit, potentially they'll rethink how they live their life, how they start their day, how they feel about themselves, and ultimately how they take care of themselves. So my interest in Skinmetal is to say, okay, there's no objections to sunscreens per se. There's objection to the formats. There's objection to the culture around it, which is guys grow up with their moms pinning them down and reminding them to wear sunscreen. And as they age, if you ask most men about sunscreen, I mean, one of the biggest insights I've had just socializing this concept for 13 years is like, I ask a guy about sunscreen and he mentions a woman in his life. So I say to a 14-year-old, hey, what about sunscreen? He says, well, my mom. And then if I ask a 40-year-old guy about sunscreen, he talks about his usually wife. Or if I ask a 20-something-year-old guy, he's like, well, my best friend is a girl and she loves skincare and she got me. Or when I go to the beach, someone's definitely around and they give it to me if I really need it. But I typically don't think I need it, right? So we feminized the product. We've underestimated dudes, and we have never given them a suite of products that gives them immediate benefits. So a girl grows up in the United States today. In Generation X and Gen Z, girls discovered beauty at age 16. Gen Alphas are discovering it at age 6. So in one generation, we've collapsed the time when beauty became interesting to a child, which is kind of horrific at face value. And at the same time, as they're discovering it, they're getting sold a bunch of stuff that doesn't provide really any health benefit. And I think girls then grow up with literally dozens of products in their bathroom counter that they're excited about, and they love the packaging and they love the rituals and they watch their mothers and they watch videos and they're all in it. And guys wake up in the morning and they can wash their face and then they can go out into the world. They don't have color correcting products. They don't have blurring for their skin. They don't have cosmetics and makeup. And they certainly aren't conditioned in some ways to have a skincare routine that provides them a UV filter, which will prevent aging in the first place, create more even skin tone, and avoid all the long-standing risks that they're not even thinking about in that day. So the goal here is to say, okay, guys have historically not wanted sunscreen. I don't think we've ever had a brand that talked about strength, confidence, investing in oneself, how good it looks on the outside and how good it feels on the inside. And simultaneously says, we're not holding you back. This isn't a seatbelt that your mom's reminding you about. This is not that white sunscreen that she's pushing you out the door and trying to send you a text message to help you avoid a sunburn. In fact, what we're calling at the company is a deep and abiding focus to permissive empowerment. The idea to say, we want to do two things at Skinmetal. We want to drive these guys outside. We want to get them out of their mom's basements out of Fortnite. We want them to be outside in the world doing things that they love with people that they enjoy. We want them to feel a sense of control and confidence that they have been underestimated and people have preyed on them being underestimated in a world of progress. And that every day when they wake up and they doubt themselves a little bit, they can start their day with a routine that says at the start of the day, instead of just buying a coffee and getting my act together and getting whatever done that I need to get done to get to work or to get something done, I'm going to start my day and put on this skin conditioning that conditions my skin, makes me look a little dewy and beautiful, puts a UV filter on so I never age. And I got my act together a little bit. And then when other people see that I've got my act together, that looks good on me. So instead of stumbling upon the things of taking care of oneself, we can kind of advance kind of being in front of it. So we launched products at the beginning that we call Daily Metal, trying to own in of like, you're just putting metal on your face, dude. Like you're just waking up, you're putting metal on it. And it is metal. It's 12% zinc oxide. It's the active ingredient. I literally went to the manufacturing facility, saw how they took raw zinc, put it in heat and pressure and created zinc oxide in a particle size that sits on the surface of your skin, is not absorbed, but deflects UV light. And so we're trying to get in on like, this is Skinmetal. Like you wake up, you put metal on, you go out in the day, you feel better about yourself over time because we have niacinamide and skin conditioners. Your skin will literally look better. And over time, your skin will look a lot better. If you start wearing sunscreen every single day in your teenage years, what you look like when you're 50 is going to be very different than if you don't.
The thought of how to change this narrative is fascinating to me because this is still just one example. And I feel like there is a lot of connection to every role that you've had in previously, down to being an early pioneer of social media and medicine, to your point, being a national public health spokesperson, to being a clinical leader. This is consumer health. Like this is not just like one size fits all. It's very specific. And when we dive into something, why this makes sense for a particular demographic versus something else, there's reasons for that. It's because it's based on behaviors we've learned that consumers either do or don't do for their health and wellness.
Well, and I think in one of your written questions you'd sent me is kind of like, why this and why now? And it's like, well, every single part of my career comes to this moment where the insights as a company that we have that I don't hear elsewhere are men and women use sunscreen differently. Consequently, we have a sex difference in cancer. So for example, at age 50, men begin to outpace women in malignant melanoma, the most deadly kind of skin cancer, dramatically. By 65, 2 times more men have it malignant melanoma than women. And by age 80, 3 times more men. So it's an exponential curve that over time, men are disproportionately burdened by their early exposure in life. So when I got skin cancer in my late 30s, that my family moved to Costa Rica when I was in high school. So I stayed back and went to college in the US and went to, did Teach for America and then went to medical school. But all my breaks, I would leave a northern climate. I would go to see my parents and family in Costa Rica right near the equator. And the risk factor for developing skin cancer is you live in a northern climate and then you vacation in a tropical climate because you get sun intensity. You go from being pasty and then you get a bang out amount of UV. And of course, you dramatically change the cells and it catches up with you. So what we see with men is that as time goes on, it's not likely physiologic difference in their skin. It's that the burden of all that UV where they didn't have the protection from cosmetics that like they're not labeled as SPF, but a lot of them have an SPF factor in them, right? From just even the rituals of taking care of one's skin and night cream and anti-aging that women have been obsessively kind of culturally geared toward in years, right? And then even the fascinations with tanning, but they're different. And we, more than anything, I could keep doing things the way that we've done them. But right now, to me, also, I want to be a capitalist on some level that of anything I've learned from working in primary care and working in a nonprofit hospital leadership and then working as a chief medical officer in a for-profit business trying to prevent disease, we built a whole system, of course, that spends all of our energy, time, and money on treating illness. We spend very little time systematically preventing these things in the first place. And the goal here is to say, if I can build a company that is profitable, that is enduring, that can be acquired by a large cosmetic company that already has distribution channels in the world, recognizes and realizes that this is a brand play, and a brand play is not dirty to medicine. A brand play is effective last mile to medicine. And I learned a lot about that in just building Seattle Mama Doc. The voice of Seattle Mama Doc was really, let's just go build trust in the science and safety of vaccinations and preventative healthcare. And let's just use a mommy blog to do it. And we realized that it was the brand in part, that it was a single individual and a personality in the early days of social media. It was much easier to build a brand as an individual person with a hospital behind me than to even build a hospital brand, right, on social media. And I was just benefited by the fact that I got to work at this amazing organization that trusted me to do that. But I think that it is a brand play. And in an ideal world, 5 years from now, this is bigger than Skinmetal. This is saying these are products that guys are going to want. Their moms, their girlfriends, their sisters, their wives aren't bringing sunscreen home and telling them to use it. We want Skinmetal to open up a segment of the category that says guys can wake up in the morning and get products that give them benefits. So we have a green formula. And that green formula is the first for men that we know of right now in the US, but I think the world, which is sunscreen that is colored with zinc and iron oxides. You put it on your face, and where you have redness, the green iron and chromium oxides literally sit down on the redness in your skin and they color correct. So when I was at the Waste Management Open, we were talking to these guys, and I had this guy who had a kind of a little redness in his nose, and he put the green format on, and the redness in his nose goes away. And he's like, dude, I'm like, dude, like that looks good, right? And my hope is because it looks good and he feels better about himself, tomorrow he puts it back on. And like, I want him to feel better about himself, of course. I want him to feel like he can take care of himself and get credit for it and ritualize it. And then secondarily, we're laying down UV filters on these guys' skin, and over time that will protect them. This doesn't have to feel like sunscreen. We want it to feel like every other part. And we have another product in formulation that I'm not publicly revealing as much, that we're going to get into the environment. It's a category creating thing that says, what do guys like to buy? And how do I get UV filters in that? And how do I put them together, get it through regulatory, and get these products that can fulfill that promise, so that 5 years from now, it isn't just about Skinmetal. It's about the reality that men are starting to believe that sun care is skincare. So women think that sun care, UV filters, is skincare. But men don't really think of it that way. And my goal is to open that up. And then after that, my goal is that this Skinmetal brand words, that sense of confidence, of investment in oneself, of going outside because of what it does for us inside, is kind of a new way. And it is owned by a large, I don't think Skinmetal needs to sit as an independent company. I think Skinmetal needs to nest within a large business that is already distributing, but is now selling not just to women and girls, but selling to boys and men.
One word I'll come back to here as we start to wrap is a word you've mentioned a couple of times, is trust. Even just the message you've just shared with me, right? If I didn't trust that, then it's only going to go so far, and it would take other people in my life to get me to consider something new for my health and wellness. So wherever it is in any conversation, I try to bring it back to making sure we're building trust. And maybe this is a great way for me to talk about this full circle moment, right? I mentioned at the very beginning. So 10 years ago, I had you on my first podcast. It was Health IT Marketer. I can barely remember the name of it. It was before Healthcare Rap. But we had you on. I was working at a children's hospital, and this was full glory days of Seattle Mama Doc and the work you were doing at Seattle Children's and the brand you were building there. And in my mind, I was so happy to have you on then, because you validated this thought of the need for trust, and especially with health communication. If I can, I compiled a book then in 2016. It was called Connect the Docs, and I included some excerpts from your interview. And I just found this. I just have to read it, like just a couple sentences here. Just a couple sentences. I'm telling you, it's as if you wrote it today. So I kind of just gave a title to each. I think it was called We Can't Know All the Answers. And the question I asked was, what's the number one piece of advice that you're sharing with patients and families right now about their health or about trust or anything? And you just said, trust your instincts. Use every resource you have, whether it's your crowd, the internet, or specialized health centers in your region. Just use everything you've got, like be as squeaky of a wheel as you want. I just have to say that has stuck with me for all these years, because literally we have to keep remembering that you have to understand that's the first place where your trust starts. And then we kind of create an ecosystem of sources that we trust in our own health, sources that we end up sharing with loved ones, with people in our own circles, with colleagues, but it's all built on that same principle. So really cool to think about, like we could have had that exact conversation.
Yeah. And one thing, I'm curious of what you trust in what I said, in that the stakes are higher than they've ever been from a standpoint of the need for those who have expertise in scientific fields, from medicine to anything, to ensure that we create relevance and contextualize truths in ways that are easily adoptable. So in this sense, in some ways, people trust sunscreen to prevent sunburn. And we know sunburn leads to risks for cancer. And we know the number one thing that ages your skin is the sun. So if you can prevent the sun from aging your skin and prevent the sun from burning your skin, you do all sorts of goodness for people. And so in my sense, but there are a lot of myths online. There are a lot of misconceptions. Tanning's back in. There's even some of the MAHA movement, which is very good. And there's some parts of the MAHA movement that are concerning, where there's kind of this natural essence of sunlight. But ultimately, sunlight is wonderful for us, but intense sun exposure to the skin will never be wonderful for our bodies and for our health. So there's always a balance, right, in that. But the stakes are so much higher than when we talked 10 years ago. So my beating the drum of getting clinicians to use their voices online at scale, and the opportunity of the democratization of media, of the advent of social media existing, and anyone being able to pick up a microphone or a video camera today and being able to broadcast to the world and potentially go viral and have resonance. It's hard to even remember the beginnings of it. But now, with the systematic defunding of government preventative health and the systematic backstepping on a trust and scientific research that what we used to believe kind of unveiled where the truth lied and where it didn't, we need to build brands with people who are deeply compelled by improving people's lives and simultaneously being capitalistic, not just being capitalistic. I mean, it's kind of obvious, but more than ever before, I want my young colleagues in medicine to join me in taking the risk of turning into a founder, of taking an idea, of fundraising around it, of making something. It's really easy to sit back and opine in an ivory tower. It's easy to sit in our own homes as a clinician, even render opinion online. It is really hard to raise money, build, manufacture, and make products, sell them with trust and storytelling, and then get them into people's homes and lives that change their behavior and downregulate their risk. And even though it's hard, I don't see something right now that could be more shaping of where we're going.
Where that would intersect what I think about on a frequent basis, again, on how to build trust or where it matters, is I personally have always taken kind of a common sense approach, but the things particularly that I felt like built trust in some of the concepts that you just shared had to do with when you said, hey, look, most frequently, most commonly, here's the data, here's the stats about how men address this differently versus women. And I was like, yep, that fits me. So it was in line with my own experience. And I also feel like I know where you're coming from. When we spoke with the head of health and wellness for TikTok, Manuel Hoyer at Health, a few months ago. And he confirmed this whole thing. He said the most trusted sources or accounts on TikTok are those that have a clinician who's clearly a clinician and a patient and consumer, non-clinician, both kind of saying the same things. So he validated people want to hear from an expert in this. In most cases, it's somebody who identifies as a clinician, but not just that. They also want to hear, okay, everyday person, like, are they saying the same thing? Are they confirming that? And that's the most frequently engaged type of health and wellness content. So validates.
Yeah, I should talk to him. I should call him. But yeah, just doing TikTok. I historically have not wanted to be on TikTok. And then recently I was at a conference where I got to meet Bobbi Brown, and she's building a whole beauty brand on TikTok ultimately. And when I talked with her, she was like, yeah, my son runs a company. I go on TikTok every day and teach people how to put on makeup. And I'm like, okay, I'm going back online. So as you've seen, I'm putting again daily Instagram content up. I'm putting up daily TikTok for the first time. And I'm just trying to articulate. I have to figure out how to resonate, because nothing I've really put up recently has been all that successful. But I think we'll figure it out, which is, hey, there's a huge opportunity to take better care of yourself, feel good about yourself, and have it reflect well on you for those around you. And it's as simple as a daily metal, right? And or these others. And I just need to articulate the problem, which is we have a sex difference in cancer. We have a huge prevention opportunity for the most common cause of cancer. And I think also clearly, this isn't a dermatologist founded company. This is not just about skincare. This is about growing up right now in the United States of America. And for me, raising two boys and having been a middle school teacher and thinking about the complexity of how do you speak up? How do you take care of your health? How do you get the girl? How do you get what you want in your life? But do so not at humiliating yourself, not being quiet, not being submissive, but rather being a good guy to yourself and ultimately and consequently being a good guy to others. And I think that's what we really want to offer, is a way of life that looks amazing and a way of life that helps you feel incredible even when it's hard to do so.
Well, thanks for indulging my full circle moment here. I'll just echo everything you just shared there.
We can real still all the time, especially unfortunately being a patient with cancer and navigating my mom's cancer and navigating my son's cancer. I mean, I can't scream enough into the microphone. When something doesn't feel right, speak up. When you don't get what you need, speak up. Keep hustling for your own health and safety. everywhere and in every part of your life.
I'm going to wrap right there. That's a mic drop right there. But thanks so much for joining us again. And yeah, let's do this again soon because we want to hear where things go here and how we can help amplify that message and keep going from there.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be back talking.